Welcome to a video recitation of Mayor Baba's final Sahavas, as read by Monica Achtrup, a writer, poet, editor, and Baba lover from the Twin Cities of Minnesota. The reading is from My Life with Mayor Baba, the Avatar of the Age, by Merwan Jessawala. The recitation describes the period of time from January 31st, 1969 to February 7th, 1969. For several months prior to this, Baba was concluding his final seclusion work in preparation for his great awakening and the ushering in of the new humanity. Although apparently completely exhausted, on July 30th, 1968, Baba emerged from his seclusion and declared, "My work is done. It is completed 100% to my satisfaction. The result of this work will also be 100% and will manifest from the end of September 1968. Although no longer in seclusion, it seemed apparent that Baba would be unable to go through with his plans for the great darshan that had been planned for the late spring of 1969. Baba's close monthly member, Merwan Jessawala, the author's brother, had been exhorting Baba to postpone the darshan until he had time to recuperate from the profound impact of his work in seclusion. After repeated attempts to convince Baba that he shouldn't go forward with the plans, Baba finally communicated, "It will be easy for me to give my lovers my darshan, so you are not to feel concerned about it. I will give darshan reclining, and that will be no strain on my body. It will be different from all previous darshans, and it will be the last in silence." What follows is a description of this most sacred 7-day period immediately following Baba's physical demise, when Baba blessed those who were closest to him with his final Sahavas.
When we arrived at Merabad, we were totally unprepared to stay on there. Besides that, Merabad had no facility to cater to the numbers of people who eventually came at that time. There were many, many people just hanging around every day, and there was not much food available there. For the first day or two, people were essentially without any food. On the third day, I think, Meherji and Chagan Master decided that they should do something. And so Chagan went to the market in Ahmednagar in Duncan's car. They bought some vegetables and dal and rice, and Duncan brought Chagan back to Merabad with those supplies. So it was that Chagan once more had to cook for a large number of people. He found a big pot, built a fire beneath it, and he prepared a mixture of lentils, rice, and vegetables, which is a very popular and simple dish cooked in India. With that food, he began to serve the people who were gathered at Merabad. They were all very hungry, and many hundreds had a nice meal after a couple of days of eating little or nothing. And the food lasted on and on and on. Everybody was amazed that so many could eat from the single, simple meal that had been prepared. Chagan had been cooking for Baba's people since the time of the Prem ashram and the school days on the hill more than 40 years earlier. That day, after Baba's body had been brought to Merabad, Chagan did a good job of cooking once again, and we all relished that food. With so many people hanging around there, Sarosh got very nervous because there weren't the necessary facilities for them to stay. So on the 4th day after Baba had dropped the body, he announced that all people from outstation should please leave. It's straining the resources of Merabad. We can't manage to have you all around here. So think about other people who will be deprived of being here if you stay on. So please leave. People were reluctant to depart, of course, because they wanted to stay until Baba's body was covered. But some did leave, just as new people kept arriving. Many little incidents like that occurred. People would sleep on the platform outside the Samadhi, or in Lower Merabad, or go to Ahmednagar, whatever they could manage, because there was no shelter there at Merabad. It was all very primitive, and nights were very cold. We literally could not stop shivering. There were ever increasing crowds wanting to have Baba's darshan, and the Mandali didn't mind. Baba's lovers did naturally want to have his darshan, so much so that some people from the West came. I don't know how they managed it. Rick Chapman and Alan Cohen came on the day prior to the covering of Baba's body. On the night of the interment itself, Rick joined Erich and me in sleeping in Baba's cabin. And the irrepressible Dr. Kenmore came, of course. Don Stevens, Adi Jr. and Delia were there from England. Mainly, the crowds were from Ahmednagar and nearby towns and cities. And as more groups came to know that darshan was continuing, people were pouring in. During all those days, the tomb was not shut for more than a few minutes at a time, several times during the day. At midnight, Erich would descend into the crypt and wipe Baba's face and readjust the cloths wrapped around his body. And he would change the ice and clean away the old sawdust. Apart from those brief pauses, darshan went on night and day. The pink roses were still pouring in, and so Baba's body was covered in his favorite color, pink. Fragrance from those flowers filled the air because the old roses were piled into the small meditation cabins next to the tomb. On the third or fourth day, a big group from Andhra came, and when they saw there was no electricity, they went rushing to Nagar and got some generators. That resulted in the first ever electricity up on the hill. As I've said, there was absolutely no shelter. So again, on the third or fourth day, a small tent was erected on the hill to give at least some protection to the milling crowds standing in the sun there and waiting to have Baba's darshan. There were all sorts of scenes as the days rolled by. Some people were so emotional they would faint and have to be carried out. Others just wanted to be in Baba's presence. Many Baba lovers, close ones, were just floating around, not knowing if they should go back to their homes or what, not knowing at all what to do. It was all very uncertain. Day after day, Baba's face became more and more fresh looking, so much so that on the fourth day, there was actually a glow and radiance on Baba's face that surprised everyone there. After the fourth day or so, the body started slowly to shrink. Still, it was clear there wouldn't be any sort of deterioration that would require the immediate covering of the body. That would never happen. Go on, Baba seemed to be saying, if we had the courage. At one point, Gohir actually went down to palpate Baba's abdominal cavity to check for gases bloating it, and to her astonishment, there was absolutely no collection of gas inside. Baba, in short, seemed to be game for continuing to give darshan lying down with his eyes closed. That's how it was. It was, in truth, a miracle. No physical body could ever have survived like that. There were blocks of ice on the sides, but nothing else. No embalming whatsoever. Anything could have happened, but nothing did. The body stayed intact, despite the intense heat every single day. Erich would have the queue stopped twice a day so that the whole samadhi could be cleaned up. Flowers, dust, everything. Erich would go down in the crypt, rearrange the blocks of ice, check Baba's face very gently and tenderly, and generally attend to the inside of the tomb before letting people in for more darshan. The women mandali came off and on as they felt up to it. The darshan went on and on and on, night and day, without break. There was not a time when there was no queue. There were milling crowds all through those 7 days. I minded the queue as much as I could bear, and then others would come and relieve me. Eventually, people got over their initial shock and the numbness that it had caused, and there was a feeling, something like being in Baba's Sahavas, as if he were giving darshan to us. A different atmosphere started to build up as the days wore on, a change from the intense initial grief. There would be bhajans, queues of people singing Baba's bhajans, and a great, very loving, reverential atmosphere developed there. I noticed that on all those days when Baba was giving darshan, people were bringing fresh roses for him. That week, starting on the morning of 1st February 1969, there was suddenly a glut in Nagar of one of the most fragrant of roses, the Persian pink rose. In India, it's called a native rose. It was Baba's favorite of all the roses, and it has a very delicate fragrance and a lovely pink color. It isn't a perfectly shaped hybrid. Being a member of the Floribunda family, it was the best fragrance for a rose, however, and there was an abundant supply of those roses, as if the rose bushes of the region had wanted to adorn Baba's body for one final time, this being their final homage to the highest of the high. Never before and never after have we seen such a flood of those particular roses in the Ahmednagar market. It was surprising. People brought basket loads of roses, and Baba's body was covered with them. In addition, his face also looked pink and rosy. Eventually, it was evident nothing would happen to Baba's body, but the darshan simply could not just go on like that. And during the last 2 days, the color in Baba's face did seem to begin to fade. We realized it would be Baba's birthday, according to the Parsi calendar, on the 7th of February. And on the 5th or 6th day, the Ahmednagar collector came to Merabad and took darshan. Then he talked with the men mandali and said he was responsible for the health of the district and that it was time to think about covering Baba's body. The women Mandali were consulted and they reluctantly agreed. We should decide the 7th should be the day to cover Baba's body. All were bolstered by the recollection that Baba had told the Mandali, on my birthday, I'll be very strong. That was a sort of indication, they felt, that Baba had told them it should be the day of his interment, because the 7th happened to be Baba's birthday, according to the Parsi calendar. Word was sent out that on 7th February, Baba's body would be interred. The night before, we held a meeting with the few volunteers who were there to decide the procedure. A 3-sided wooden box had already been made to lower over Baba's body, so there wasn't much further preparation that needed to be done. We decided at 11 a.m. we would stop the darshan queue, and the trustees, whoever were present, would assemble with some of the close disciples and Mandali. They would lower the wooden box into the crypt and cover Baba's body from the top. We planned how to arrange the crowds, where to keep them, and whether they should be there at the Samadhi when the interment started. Before the time arrived, however, Sarosh suddenly gave the order to stop the darshan half an hour early, so a good many people were deprived of their last view of Baba. But just before the darshan was stopped, we heard a car pull up, and Edward and Erwin Luck rushed to the tomb. They arrived in time to have Baba's darshan, and they were the last 2 Westerners to come to Mehrabad for that most extraordinary last darshan. Their love was such that it brought them to Baba just in the nick of time. The ice blocks around his body were being removed as they arrived, so they were fortunate to help with that service. The women Mandali came for their last sight of their beloved Baba, and Mama and Manu were with them. After they had that visit, Erich had prayers said by baby Mera, who had been standing outside offering ash from the urn that was burning day and night since 1st February 1969. And later again, the prayers were recited by Harry Kenmore. Then Arti was performed, and finally, the box was carried in by Sarosh, Adi, and others. I was also called to be present, but I was controlling the crowd at that time, so I missed being there at the end. Ropes were attached to the box cover, and it was gently lowered onto Baba's body. Baskets of roses and rose petals were then scattered over the box, and finally, each one inside the tomb threw a handful of earth onto the box. Then the darshan line was started again, and each person took a handful from 2 big mounds of earth kept outside the tomb. I had got away from the crowd control duty by then and was able to put my own handful of earth onto the box covering Baba. Very soon, the whole crypt, the pit into which Baba's body had been laid, was totally full of earth, and it formed a big heap. And then it was all over. By noontime, on the 7th day, Baba's body was covered. Slowly, Mehrabad emptied as people began to return to their homes. How fortunate were those who were able to come and see Baba for the final time before his beautiful physical form was hidden forever from our sight.